perhaps I should explain our presentation. I mean, mix them. Okay, Saul and I were going to present projects that we didn't actually present projects for the second presentation, but not for comes a really big joke. Well, a joke. Deadline who deals with the deadline, to-do list, etc. So, as we didn't put any deadline on that project, it's in the air somehow. I mean, it's not totally in the air, but pretty much so. So we're going to talk more about, I guess, our interest in deadline and to-do list, etc., and perspective for super great tips like procrastination tips of the Zeta script kiddies.
Well, yeah, this will maybe turn into a 5-minute or a 10-minute introduction.
Yes.
Following with apologies to Danny O'Brien, who
our hero,
who's been doing this a research project which is turning into a book called Tech Secrets of the Over-Prolific Alpha Geeks, where he goes around and he interviews people and tries to find out about all of their little tips and tricks and hacks and bits of software that they use to become super efficient. That means they become prolific alpha geeks. So our research project that we're briefly going to introduce and invite you to participate in is Tech Secrets of the Procrastinating Zeta Script Kiddies.
Yes.
So you're all invited. Well, I don't know. There's so
we can start by having a look at Danny O'Brien project, because he also somehow started from a similar point of view as us, in the sense that he said, okay, I'm a very badly organized programmer, and I'm going to get all the secret of how do alpha geeks organize their time and everything. But the problem, so he opens a forum which is pretty funny.
Well, I don't know. Let's not look at Danny O'Brien's
okay.
thing. I mean, we don't want to talk too much.
Anyway, the link
we're
is
showing
in
his
the
things.
presentation. I mean, on that page.
On this page.
Yes.
Oh yes. Okay.
So you can all go in and see where comes our wonderful science.
The one thing, the kind of the interest in deadlines is just that the idea of being over prolific and being an alpha geek or being productive, and I think probably everybody feels the pressure of deadlines. It's a pretty terrible and ubiquitous horror that we have, and so all we've come up with so far is this name, the Night of the Living Deadline, and to attempt to circumvent that or to change it, we're trying to look for solutions that people have for recasting their problems and their deadlines and their worries in such a way that they don't necessarily become problems anymore through the great and wonderful tradition of procrastination. So I was going to just show a couple of things. One is shall I show this now?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. And then we'll move on to a presentation of things that we actually have done. I was just going to show one use of software that I think recasts things in a very interesting way in relation to kind of deadlines and to-do lists. Huh?
You are supposed to talk about your page first.
I'll talk about that in a bit. Okay, well, just one is Reboot FM, which is a Berlin-based radio station. Now, and that radio station used to be on the airwaves. And they have a very beautifully coded interface for sharing their programs, and they've done an awful lot of work. But their program suggestion interface, so the way that you suggest that you want to put a program on Reboot FM, is that you submit a bug to their bug tracking system, and your program suggestion comes up as an error in their system, which of course would be perfect if nobody suggested anything to them or communicated with them in any way. But then it goes through this process of somebody has to solve and resolve this problem, which is that somebody wants to do something with them. And I thought that was one way of recasting a problem or a necessity. And then I was also just going to show something that I've done quickly, which is I don't want to say too much about this because it's pretty flaky. But basically, I wanted to start a blog to see how easy it was to become narcissistic and self-involved. And I realised that actually what most blogs transmitted to me was a kind of register of somebody's busyness and like the kind of input and output of their information. So instead of doing that, I've just got my to-do list is here online for everybody to see. It's just like how important and how busy I am, how many cool things I have to do. Put in there. And then how many emails I'm getting. It's just how popular and in demand I am. And then there's a little register of all the spam that I'm receiving, and a graph of my email sending habits. I've only sent 2 messages today, which might give you some indication of my productivity level. And you can see just how lazy I've been over the last, today was unbelievably bad. Seeing that I've often averaged 13 messages per minute. And here we go, this week, it's been difficult. The month's been patchy, and you can just see that my productivity level is going down and down and down and down. So anyway, this is all inspired by, and with apologies to Danny O'Brien, but it's a collection of small Unix utilities instead of a piece of software. And I should talk about this really soon. Anne?
Oh. No, we were supposed to ask for help first. One thing is, since we've been starting discussing about deadlines, release, etc., I guess we have had lots of silly idea for crazy features, etc. And from create kind of a temporary community for deadline zombies in full production or exchange of information. No, like lots of people have in mind a lot of trivia and find other people who actually becomes kind of a not manager, but kind of keep for you the important dates, because for them it's just like specify references or whatever, and they keep the same for themselves, blah blah blah. So we set up, I think, a page on the wiki, and if you have like super great tips for dealing with to-do list, etc. So please help us. We are in need badly. So thanks.
Okay, so that's just an apology, which actually has kind of managed to take on the
Okay.
whole.
Oh wow, we take it 9
did pretty
minutes.
well.
Wow.
Well done.
So do
Next.
people have suggestions, questions already? Or
No, you can make them later on if you want.
all right. So we are moving ahead and going to the Laforet and Albert part. But anyway, that doesn't change anything. Yeah, I know, but on the program. Anyway, so now we're going to talk about some work that we actually started, at least, is Laforet. We are a researcher in the Faculty of Taxonomy of the University of Openness, and the faculty taxonomy has been funded to investigate categorization structure, classification schemas, and to look at the method people have developed to deal with the mess of life. And we really see taxonomy as a playground to experiment, build, and destroy also things. So the faculty is part of the University of Openness, a self-institution dedicated to research. So, shall you? You can talk about the taxonomical software.
Okay, right. Well, seeing as this is interesting,
Software.
with software. Sorry. What I wanted to do was to try and introduce a few pieces of software. Not all of them involving my programming, but to try and look at a few problems which I think are related to this idea of taxonomy and ways of sorting things out, and particularly the difficulty of having communal taxonomies or shared ways of making sense of things. And there's been a few, I know some of you may be familiar with debates about the possibility of shared taxonomies and ontologies using semantic web technology, but I'm not going to go into one of these horrible, rambling, nasty, evil discussions of the semantic web, which take forever, and I've already had bad experiences with trying to do. Instead, I'm going to show you this picture of a piece of well, it's a bit of a park in Bristol, and start from there. So this was a judgment matrix. This was a way of judging a game that developed in a very ad hoc fashion when during the Bristol Urban Olympics in August 2003. So the Bristol Urban Olympics was a series of events organised by the Cube Cinema, Heath Bunting and Kate Rich and Cale Brandon, amongst others, in Bristol. And this was the downhill shopping bike racing event, which was suggested by the Tattered Dandelion Collective. They were artistic collective together and suggested events. And I mean, I haven't watched any of this current Olympics, but I have a feeling this was far more interesting. So we started out shopping bike race having just two axes, as you can see, they were kind of right to each other. There's the pain axis and the speed axis, and you simply plotted somewhere on that graph. But pretty soon after the first race, somebody else added the fear axis, which actually nobody admitted to involve at all here, and the shopping axis, which was just about how many items of you could keep in a little basket on the front of your bicycle. And then Lottie Child, who went down the hill in high heels, in some really expensive, nice Manolo Blahniks high heels, if that's how you pronounce it, added the style axis, because although she did very badly in the speed and the pain category, she did rather well in style terms. Anyway, what I'm seeking to illustrate by showing this is that the idea of categorising something, or judging it, or measuring it, or plotting it somewhere on a graph that makes sense for all the people involved in the judgment, requires as many axes of judgment as there are participants. And yeah, there were 5 entrants to this event, and so actually, yeah. Am I finished already?
No.
Okay. I didn't think I was finished. So, this kind of illustrates for me the problem of shared understandings of metrics and scales and categories, but it also illustrates the facility of changing this in a very dynamic way, and of actually engaging in a process of ad hoc and quite flippant rearrangement of those categories that really works. And yeah, I mean, we're not quite sure who won this event, but it functioned. I think number 4 won. It wasn't me, so I don't really remember. There were various appeals to the Olympic Committee about this particular race. I think the prize eventually went to Cale, who broke her arm, and so she got the pain maxed out somewhere over here. Sorry, here. So this is a kind of a picture of the problem and a possible solution, but of course the solution is very non-technological and kind of involves chalk, which is a good place to start. Here's another proposed solution. Do you want me to check it? Not necessarily now, but please.
Okay, I will. Yeah.
Okay. So this is a diagram which is actually not zoomed in enough for you to see, of the musical categories and links between musical categories of Last.fm, which is a piece of software written by 2 Austrians, Michael and Martin, whose surnames I can't remember and I feel terrible about it. But they've both presented at Dortbot London, and their software, their radio station is it's a really interesting attempt to. What's going on? Oh yeah, it's just What? Okay, you log into Last.fm, and instead of choosing what music you want to listen to, you just have a fast forward button and a I don't hear this ever again button, and fast forward button, don't want to hear this ever again button, and a overwrite this tune button. So anything that you listen to and you don't intervene in it's marked up as something that you're willing to tolerate, something that you love. Obviously, is marked up as something you love. A tune that you hear that you ban is given a kind of a little red mark against it, and just by tracking what kinds of things you're listening to in a stream, each user gets their individual stream of music. It starts to build up a profile of your musical habits and interests, and the proximity of your musical habits and interests to those of other people in the system. So instead of having a categorization structure derived from commercial music industry categories and taxonomies, you get accumulations of interest that are derived from people's ears, from their responses to actually hearing something, rather than knowing that this is rock and this is pop and this is whatever. So you get these odd. This is a diagram of one of them, and when they first started, they did have something that mirrored music production, and it pretty soon began to grow little tangential blobs and artists that you never imagined. People who listen to Sting and Bad Manners and Jewel and any kind of bizarre music backwards you've heard of, will suddenly want to follow some huge success and style that you never heard of. So this.
Is there any way to make that diagram bigger? We can't.
I'm
really
afraid
do
not.
anything on it.
No.
What's the URL?
Last.fm.
LAST.
LAST. And it's great. It's a really, I mean, you can choose to listen to things that you're likely to like because it's similar. You're listening to somebody else's profile which nearly matches yours, or you can listen to something which is as far in your musical profile as you can imagine, so you get these very unexpected things.
By the way, can I interview or?
Of course you can.
Okay. I'm really like to download a lot of stuff. And the way you're now talking about how preferences put together in this system look like the way download and a lot of other people are downloading a lot of music software, movies. Just were the same music, and I'm not talking about like Shield clients, DC plus, maybe like Soulsy, but what you can, I'm not so much sure how to count that.
Well,
what you do is that
yeah.
you can get a peek in something, you download something and you can get a peek what you share it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something obscure and it downloads fast. And there are titles you don't recognize. You start also to download. So it's also, you get sort of,
Yeah, you get
sort of same
okay, but
the nice thing
yeah.
is also in this works in that you directly can contact this person. You can
yeah.
check with it or her.
Yeah, I mean they've yeah, that's an interesting. It relates, definitely, yeah. And you begin to like, exactly, these interesting structures of emergent categorization that have a social dimension and operate through software but aren't mechanistic in the sense that they don't have emotional or algorithmic relationships. They're more based on your kind of whimsical browsing and perusal and yeah. How you like, how you examine things. But this is a really interesting project that I could go on about it for ages. But I should probably try and wrap this up. I thought the work about this is the fact that the emergent taxonomical these categories are the interest of those involved in creating them in an a priori sense, that they decide what these categories are, but that they emerge from their use. Linguistic structure, but then the problem thing was unsatisfying. The reason it didn't really didn't become as useful as this chalk drawing is because it's a profile, it's somebody's data weight being examined, intentional product of listening habit is then turned into a profile about them that is then used to generate these taxonomies, it's not that they have a specific interest in generating these things and they're doing it in an intentional way. So it still didn't do what this one did.
And we have a whole page on the wiki, on the faculty wiki dedicated to music taxonomy. So if you had nice taxonomy to add, that's a place. We had lots of fun with a website and the Ishker History of Electronic Music with very exotic genres such as Bud Rock Goa and everything.
God,
but let's no, I think we'll stay for. Okay. So.
I think it would be interesting to look at photo categories. I mean, I could return to the taxonomy thing, but maybe certainly in respect of Brad's talk, it would be interesting to go back to photo categories.
Okay, so there was a temporary office for the faculty taxonomy in Newcastle, where some invited, and I joined for a few days, and there were lots of games in the office. We played a game called Categories, which I'm sure you know, where you choose a certain number. It's a word game, so you choose a letter and then you agree on a certain number, like 8 categories, and the person that's in the quickest time all the words, one word for each category with that special letter won. And it was pretty funny, but also as a as English not my mother, I was very bad, and I was doing it in French, but I was like sending the 2 requests, like French and English same time, so it was. So, and after a while it wasn't that funny anymore, so we were thinking of perhaps find a game. And with a game called Photo Categories, it needs a better name, really. It's really a default one, but hopefully we'll find a sexy name sometime. But, it's based on the memory game, but instead of having the memory game is you have pairs of images. You have to find the cover up, and you have to find the good. Not the good, but the pairs when you turn them up. And but instead of having pairs, we actually had pictures, and we went on a photo trip. We had lots of fun with taking pictures and then going to a digital printer, but also the idea of the photo is that you can also use pictures you already have, even if it's only a castle and everything. I'm sure that's fun to have. So the idea is to have 64 pictures and not identical ones, and then when 2 pictures are up, then the player has to find a category on the spot, but he has to be agreed by the other participant. So and if the other participant say, okay, we agree, it's a category, then again, there's some more photos are open. So,
the interesting thing about the game of categories for us, and I think the way that it relates maybe interestingly to your presentation, Brad, was the fact that you always have to negotiate. Does this thing fit into this category? Could you have, if your category is facial expressions, is camp an appropriate facial expression? Do we agree? I thought yes. Everybody else refused to accept that one, so I didn't get any points for that. But this game, I think, models maybe a flexibility in the same way that you were talking, that I mentioned about your game, that reducing the number of faces of the die to 1 changes the mechanism of the game. Photo categories, which actually Anne invented, but she was trying to spread around the credit for it. It moves laterally in 2 different ways. So you have things that relate. That if you have a grid of 64 and you're turning one over and then turning the other over and trying to match them up, you can either match them up by the words and the linguistic association or by visual association. So you start to get the mechanism of the game changes in that it becomes lateral process of category making, where your method of constructing category can be visual or linguistic.
Could you give us a few examples? So I'm not sure I'm following how the game
Okay. So each of these photos was a single photo laid on the floor in a 64, in an 8x8 grid.
The double
Yeah, they're now joined together in the categories in which they ended up.
Yes.
okay.
So you turn over one photo. The memory game, you turn over one photo, you try and remember where the identical one is, you match them up, you get the points.
Okay,
Points.
so the labels underneath are the agreed upon categories.
Yeah, these are the
Yes.
categories that we ended up with. I mean,
And the trick is that they're random or dissimilar most likely, so you have to agree upon a similarity.
Yeah.
Yes.
the group has to collectively agree that you're allowed to take this, you're allowed to have this category, this makes sense to us as a group. So you get the negotiation about that moment becomes quite interesting and adds a whole range of dimensions to the game, including whatever kinds of illicit affairs are going on between people involved in the game and all kinds of primate politics, but it's interesting. So this is one of the games that we developed that I thought might be a useful reference point. So the other piece of taxonomic software that I really wanted to present and that I think may be the most useful and interesting of these.
Oh, you have 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Or
That may be the
17
most,
hours.
that may be the most useful of these, of the pieces of software or ideas or games that we've so far tried to talk about, is a piece of software by Joshua Schachter called Delicious, and some of you may be familiar with this. It's a deceptively appealing website. It's simply a list of links. At the most basic, this is a linked list contributed to by an active community, so a social bookmark structure. So if I log in, then I need a couple of little bookmarklets. Okay, so these are little tiny JavaScript programs that allow me, as I'm browsing around the web, to add to Delicious. And then, yeah, we're running out of time.
Oh yeah.
Okay, so say I'm at dorkbot.org. I'll show you the mechanism of adding something. I'm at dorkbot.org and I want to post it. I told Alexi that I never ever present using the internet. I lied. So if I post this to Delicious, I get, just to add URL description, extended, and I can tag it. So I might call it art, stupidity, and what happens in this case is that now I probably have a few new categories here. I have these are all my categories. These are all the ways I categorize things. Now I probably have a Douglas category. Unfortunately, the only thing that's in it is dorkbot. But what you get here is that 4 other people have also tagged dorkbot. These people, somebody called Heresiarch, pronounce that, Yonder Boy, and I can see what other things that they've categorised, and I can also see they've categorised differently. So Yonder Boy has called it art, community, geek culture. Betsy the Divine has called it fun and geek. Joshua has called it art and NYC. Heresiarch has called it community, and so you get the same things categorised in many different ways, and that starts to. Is that the end? Never mind. So it's the end of the question period.
No.
In question period. Okay, so all I'm going to say is maybe explore this piece of software, and I've been doing just in the last day tagging things with the RDO4 tag, and that's all I've tagged them with. I haven't given them any other designations or categorizations. So each of the presentations today have been submitted to Delicious, and if you log in and register and you also categorize these things, what will start to happen is that each of these links, which are to all the presentations we've had today, can be qualified by the addition of whatever keywords you want to use. So they might be blur, which I reserve for things that I find disgusting in a way that I can't quite describe. So I just call them blur, and I hope that other people will help me figure out by linking to other things. But anyway, so I think, yes, it's time for, are there any questions? I know this has been very sprawling, but yes.
I was wondering, how do you see the relationship between this continuous reflection on the arbitrary nature of the taxonomies and actually trying to get a consensus of what is a good category? I mean, the continuous reflection is it's more of a process that has no ending. But at some point you reach a result saying, well, this is a good category, we'll settle with this or something.
There are various.
Do you mean in what? In the game or in the possible research?
Just in your way of thinking about these these processes and this way of taxonomies. Am I not being
Yeah,
No,
I understand your question. I think that there's two categories that are really prescient and useful and that everybody wants to get involved in, which is good and bad. And everything else that comes between good and bad is just kind of a dissection of all the various random or arbitrary taxonomies that you might use to give these kind of major categories of good and bad or good and evil, or whatever, like big questions, have lots of little questions, and the communal nature of generating taxonomies to me seems like a process where you work your way towards the big, simple categories by making lots and lots of little ones. And I think, particularly with the discussions that I heard during the conference this week about, different kinds of art making, which you might describe as software art or code or whatever. And these are taxonomical structures that have, a lot of attention focused on them here, and so looking at taxonomies as a way of maybe looking at the mechanism of the way that these things are organised, rather than arguing about whether or not something fits.
I guess also, more generally, we are in a world that have already full of categories around us that we don't necessarily see but are there, and we see them as neutral while they are politically constructed, and I think a lot of people are interested in, instead of getting into one box or the other, perhaps either play with this, like multiply categories and really subvert them in many ways. So
sorry, if with the transformation games we ended up asking the question, what do these transformations mean? Do we also need to ask with these taxonomies, what do these different taxonomies mean?
Which the transformation games? You mean the categories game?
Well,
no, you
I
mean Brad.
with
Brad's
with
games.
Yeah,
Yeah, I mean, what do the taxonomies mean is asking, does this thing fit into it? Does that thing fit into it? Does this association of things?
What it's asking is, what are the implications of dividing things up into different sets of categories?
Okay.
Well, that's the whole purpose of the faculty. So join and become a member, and so you can play with us, because that's really what it is about. We don't. I mean, I don't have any answers on why things are categorized or how, etc. It's more like I'm curious of.
Are there any implications of the differences?
Differences. Yeah. Okay.
Is there a taxonomy of taxonomies?
Of course there are. If you look at, if you want to gain some, if you use the system, you want to go there and you want to see all the things that fit into one of the category. If everybody can add a category, then we will end up with a lot of categories which are not very populated initially.
Mhm.
But if you play this game with the pictures, where a group has to agree on a category, then you have a very a set where the group is aware of what the category is, and will probably have will find more in it because you know what the category means.
Yeah, I agree. We need to move on, but
delete categories
can we?
And what do you do with the documents that are in categories you don't need anymore?
We're cutting into the announcements, but I mean, I think this is a really good point, and I would love to talk about this more. Also, I should mention probably that there was actually a point to this presentation, and somehow everything, like all the ground's been prepared, and the point is missing. Actually, the point is a piece of software that we are developing, and it's kind of secret. So if you're tantalized by some of the issues involved in this and want to have more of an idea of the kind of practical and political dimensions of it, then please do come and talk to me, because I'd love to explain to you when there's plenty of time and we're not cutting into.
Are you categorically refusing to tell us?
No, I'll tell you. I have to decide which category you fit into before I decide what I'm going to tell you.